David, before you get too much farther, do you mind if I just jump in for a quick second?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. And sorry to interrupt. Thanks for everybody for being here today. I'm very excited about this. I've got a little bit of a childcare issue that has come up this evening, so I'm not really going to be able to stay, but I did want to say that I'm excited this is moving forward. I'm looking forward to seeing the recorded video and the compiled feedback. So thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about this. And I'll look forward to catching up with this meeting and everybody's feedback very soon. And thank you, David.
Of course. Thank you. All right, so we can go ahead and jump right in. My name is David Greaves. I work with NDOT in their traffic calming program. And tonight we're going to be talking about both South 11th Street and South 16th Street. These are streets that are pretty close together. They're actually pretty different in their form, so we can review the designs as well. This is a virtual only meeting, so like I said before, this is being recorded, will be uploaded online, and available for anyone who wasn't able to make it here tonight. So we'll start with some overview information, kind of explaining the program and its tools, but we'll start by just asking, what is traffic calming? So NSTC, that's Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program. We focus on residential streets only. We lean on physical solutions that encourage lower speeds over kind of significant lengths. Basically, that means we don't do these one block at a time typically, but we'll choose like a longer stretch of road to address with traffic calming. And one of the main goals for these projects is speed reduction. So if cars are traveling faster than they should be, that's usually a good sign that traffic calming might be a good idea for that street. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. That's education. So that's kind of what we're doing right now, having a meeting with neighbors, sort of telling you about the program, why driving appropriate speeds is important. There's also enforcement. We would all love if all traffic laws were enforced everywhere. Unfortunately, this is pretty much only up to MNPD, and they are asked to do a lot with a little. So we cannot have traffic radar speed traps on every street. So we do not let that be the whole solution for speeding. And then finally, we have engineering. So that's really what NDOT has at their disposal to help control speeds in Nashville. So what we've done is kind of taken a look at both of these roads, come up with a concept design for each of them that should help to slow speeds with the tools we have available. This is a reminder of kind of what this is all for. Mainly, we are focused on safety, and with that, vision zero. So the vision that nobody dies or is seriously injured on Nashville's roadways. The reason slowing vehicle speeds is so important is because if a person were to be struck by a car, their odds of surviving that encounter go way up as speeds kind of slow down to that 25-ish mile an hour range. And then the flip side, they unfortunately go way down as speeds approach like the 45 miles an hour mark. So on roads where we expect to have a lot of people walking, pedestrian activity, people living their lives, we really would like cars to be going a speed appropriate for that context and not putting people in danger just for traveling, where they live. This is a program that's in a pretty high demand. This map off to the right is every street that has applied to the traffic calming program, zoomed way out, obviously, but those are all those purple lines. And as of August 2023, there were over 500 neighborhood streets being considered for traffic calming. And in the summer of 2023, 85 of those were selected. A typical year will do 25 streets every 6 months, but this summer we're sort of ripping off a Band-Aid, got some additional funding, and are tackling 85 rather than the normal 25. So we're very excited and also very busy. There's a few things that the traffic calming program does and a lot of things that the traffic calming program does not do. So for pretty much any request having to do with Metro Nashville that doesn't fall under the things we're talking about tonight, we want to make sure everyone is aware of Hub Nashville as a resource. They can be called at 311, reached online at hub.nashville.gov, or my preferred method is just the app. You can have it on your phone and it'll be ready to make requests as they come up. Those can be anything from, like issues with streets and roads, sidewalks, potholes, you name it, but also things like public safety, trees, litter. It's a pretty exhaustive list. So I'd encourage anyone to go check it out and use it as a tool to interact with Metro Nashville government. This is breaking down a little bit more about how vehicle speeds, volumes, and such factor into the prioritization. So this pie chart off to the right, those are the different weights that our 5 scoring factors have on the rank. So when a street applies, we'll go out and collect data on how fast are cars going, how many cars are driving here, have there been any accidents involving pedestrians or cyclists, and then what do the sidewalks look like? Are there schools? Are there parks? All of that. We can see that vehicular speeds and volumes do make up the vast majority of the score there. And that's mainly because vehicular speeds and volumes, those are the source of the danger we're trying to address. So if a street is having a lot of speeding on it, even if it isn't close to like a park, we want to make sure that those are rising to the top of the list. So here are some data on the streets that we're talking about tonight. I will say the South 11th Street application had kind of an interesting ride to winding up in this program. It's actually the only one selected where there isn't technically a speeding problem, because for those of you who don't know, South 11th Street is posted at 35 miles an hour as the speed limit. This was flagged as something that we as traffic engineers thought was inappropriate, and it's something that's been complained about by residents and users of that neighborhood as well. So what's happened with South 11th Street is a speed limit reduction request has been sent to the Traffic and Parking Commission, and NDOT has recommended to them that the speed limit be lowered to 25 miles an hour, which is going to be a much more appropriate speed for the context, considering this extends into 5 Points where there is all kinds of pedestrian activity going on, and we really don't want cars driving at 35 miles an hour through areas like that. It's also a much higher volume than we typically see on neighborhood streets. So 2,700 vehicles per day is quite a bit. So we know that if someone was like crossing the street or something, they'd have a pretty high likelihood of encountering a vehicle when they do that. South 16th is a little bit different. The 85th speed here is 36 miles an hour, so actually higher than the 85th on South 11th Street. I strongly suspect that has to do with the hills. The section of South 16th we're talking about is basically the massive dip between Shelby and Lillian. So if you were to drive on that road and do nothing, don't hit the gas or anything like that, I suspect you'd be going pretty fast by the time you got to the bottom of that hill. But also the volume is reasonably high for a street like that. 1,600 is certainly nothing to sneeze at, and worth considering as well. Here's the map of those streets we were just talking about, if anyone's not familiar. That kind of 5-legged intersection up at the top left, that's 5 Points. The section of South 11th Street only extends up to Holly, So we won't be proposing speed cushions like in that commercial district type of the street, but the rest down to Shelby is being considered for traffic calming. And then, like I mentioned, the section of South 16th is quite a bit shorter. I believe the limits from Shelby and the Lillian were the ones that were applied for in the original application. Before I move on and give information about NDOT's traffic calming toolkit, I wanted to pause and just take any questions that folks might have about what we've reviewed so far, if any.
I'll note that, so when we originally applied, JD Lane from NDOT was the contact who talked about the speed limit, and apparently NDOT still had 11th Street listed at 35 miles per hour, but it's been signed at 25 for a couple years already now. So I remember we got that email, and I ran outside and took a picture of the stop sign or the speed limit sign and sent it to him, and that's how we got back in the program. So you can scratch that off the traffic and parking agenda, I guess. But
Interesting.
It's already posted at 25, so that 85th percentile is 8 miles per hour over the posted limit already.
I see. Well, thank you for that context. In any case, it definitely makes sense to not be 35. All right. Well, we can go ahead and move on. So big number one item in our tool belt are speed cushions. NDOT has had pretty good experience installing these in all sorts of neighborhoods around Nashville, and basically zeroed in on them as the preferred starting point for a traffic calming design, mainly because they physically affect vehicles as they traverse them. Unlike signs and paint, they're not really like an optional measure. Not that speed limits are intended to be optional, but if I was speeding on a road that was signed lower than I'm driving, there's nothing really physically stopping me from doing that. Speed cushions don't prevent anyone from speeding, but basically they'll create discomfort driving over them if you were going at a higher speed. So the kind of 20 to 25 mile an hour range is really where your most comfortable traversal of these is going to happen. They're not speed bumps like you'd see in a parking lot. Those are more intended to reduce speeds down to like 5-10 miles an hour. These are elongated such that driving over them at like a normal driving speed is sort of what we're after here. They're about 6 feet wide, and the reason for that is providing the opportunity for larger emergency vehicles to sort of run directly over the center of them. The thinking behind that is with the wider wheelbases, they'll be less affected in terms of speed than like a regular smaller car would be. I can't say that they have no effect on them, of course, but we have had success using these and not impeding emergency vehicles from getting where they need to go. They do come in different lengths depending on the target speed we're after. Those are 7, 10.5, 14. The longer the cushion, the faster you're able to comfortably drive over them. And those are elongated just by adding additional modules in the middle of the cushions. Next up are speed tables. So these are a lot like speed cushions. They're made of all the exact same parts and pieces. The only difference is they do stretch all the way across the road. We try to avoid these on any road that may be useful for emergency services. So because East Nashville is very interconnected, we don't have a lot of like dead end streets. We'll probably lean more heavily on speed cushions than tables, and these are a little more niche in terms of their application. So as I mentioned before, NDOT has had a good experience with the vertical measures we've talked about. There's all kinds of like national research that has shown speed humps, speed cushions, and such do what they're intended to, and slow speeds. But NDOT, in addition to that, has collected their own data on a few projects around town, and they've seen similar decreases in vehicle speeds. So this chart sort of sums up the data from 6 projects. We can see the average went from 31 to 22, and then the 85th speed went from 37 to 25. If anyone doesn't know, the 85th speed is kind of a statistical measure. It works sort of like the median, such that 85% of people are going slower than that number, and then 15% of people are going faster. And the reason it's important is it is sort of the benchmark by which we judge like what is a normal driver traveling on this roadway. In sort of the category of less common things, we have radar feedback signs. Usually we slide these in wherever we can't do speed cushions. So speed cushions have some constraints on where you're allowed to put them. Steep hills are one, curves are another. If a curve is too tight, we don't want to like surprise somebody with a an obstacle that may take them off guard. So these aren't usually our first choice for a traffic calming design, but sometimes they're necessary. And we'll see later in the presentation, they're necessary on South 16th. We can also do pavement narrowing. So this just entails painting white edge lines on the side of the road at a, like 10-foot lane width or so. And that's really to sort of like psychologically tighten up the space people are driving in. Unlike speed cushions, it doesn't like physically affect any vehicles, but it does sort of trick your brain into thinking that this is a narrower environment than it actually may be. We know that wider lanes sort of induce more comfortable driving at higher speeds. So this is to counteract the streets that may have been built really wide, but are now suffering some consequences from that approach. Bulb outs and chicanes. These are another tool in our tool belt that have some pretty specific uses. The bulb outs are intended to take intersections that are larger than they need to be and shrink them up so that space for pedestrians is a little bit more, and the turning movements made by vehicles are a little more constrained, and thus are forced to be taken a little more slowly. So if you can imagine the difference between like turning off a really wide interstate ramp onto a large road, that curve is going to be pretty large, and then the counter is making a really tight turn into your driveway. You're not able to turn very fast into your driveway because it is just like a hard right angle. So bulb outs shoot for somewhere in the middle of those two things. We certainly don't want anyone like crawling, but we definitely prefer to keep turning movements, slow and deliberate so that everyone stays safe. Chicanes are for pretty wide roads. Basically, if a road is really wide, has space for kind of a zigzagging pattern down the road, that maneuvering sort of slows vehicles as they travel along, with the intent of just keeping those vehicle speeds lower. And then finally, we have traffic circles. These are a little more difficult to implement on many of Nashville's streets, given certain like constraints we have with emergency vehicles and their required turning movements. But we will put these in if an intersection is like especially large, and it would work well as a sort of roundabout kind of situation. They're not technically roundabouts. Those are a little more involved, but these are intended to act like one so that, you can't just blow through an intersection without being impeded in some way. And that's all I've got on the sort of general traffic calming information before we dive into the designs we're proposing. So I want to take another minute to pause and just take any questions that may have come up over what we've covered so far. All right, sounds like we can move on. So this is our concept design for South 11th Street. Basically, for speed cushions on street grids like this, about 1 per block is about the right number. There's some spacing guidance that we get, but with so many cross streets, it's usually better to just do them at that sort of block length interval. On our site visit, it was obvious that this was a high pedestrian traffic area. So there's lots of commercial businesses attracting people to this road, and it is a grid where we felt that bulb outs were really appropriate at all of these intersections. That's not something we tend to do on most traffic calming projects, but because this one is such an interesting mix of residential and commercial, we're wanting to give this approach as much as we can throw at it, really. So for anyone who didn't remember the picture, basically what those look like are painted double white edge lines into the road. Pavement is reserved for pedestrian space. It also helps to prevent street parking too close to an intersection. So sight lines are better for those looking to cross the road. You just have a higher chance of being seen and not blocked by like somebody's car that's parked. And then 16th is quite a bit different. So we went out there, took as many grade measurements as we could, and there is no point on the entire street that is flat enough for cushions that is not also like too close to that intersection of Basketball. So unfortunately, we are not planning on doing speed cushions on 16th, but we will address the speeding that we see with a couple of radar feedback signs close to the bottom of each of those hills. That way, the idea is if somebody were inadvertently picking up speed as they go down, you'll at least get that feedback like, oh shoot, I'm going 36 miles an hour, better like slow down. It would be nice if we had more options available here, but this is our concept that we've got in mind right now. Part of this meeting is to take feedback from neighbors. So I'm happy to just kind of open the floor and get any comments or questions. Really, whatever you all want to talk about, I'm here to discuss.
I live. My name is Patrick Kuntz. I live on the bottom of 16th and Basketball, and I mean, I guess I know there's engineering limitations, but I almost think the radar would even be worse than nothing because people go as fast as they can down the hill, and it may even encourage them to go even faster. I mean, I think we were all hoping for something that would physically stop cars, like a chicane or stop sign or like a speed bump. I guess I'm just curious why you couldn't install the speed cushions anywhere along that route.
So basically, the way the speed cushions are installed on the ground, they're bolted. So when you have the forces of a car acting on the speed cushion, if it's flat, that all goes down and is absorbed by the pavement. But on a hill, the force hitting the cushion is partially down, but also partially like forward. And basically, the bolts aren't intended to take that sort of lateral stress. What all that boils down to is the manufacturer of these won't warrant speed cushions that are installed on grades more than 8%. So on either side of 16th, the steepest is like in the 15 to 16% range, and it only flattens out to 8, pretty close to Basketball Street. It's not necessarily out of the question to put a cushion like very close to Boscobel Street. We definitely prefer not to have these like too close to intersections, but I do recognize that this is a unique case, to say the least. So if anyone feels strongly that we should investigate doing that, I'd be happy to.
Okay, I'll turn it over to my neighbors, but yeah, I mean, I guess my feedback is I appreciate you guys doing what you can, but I really just think unless there's some physical limitation, people are not going to slow down. I'm really worried that the radar signs may actually do the opposite. And yeah, if there's anything you could do, even put something in the actual intersection itself, that would be my preference. So I'll put myself back on mute. Thank you.
Of course.
Hi, I'm Kent Richardson, and actually I live in that exact area as well. And I completely agree with Patrick. There's people that purposely go down that hill. Purposely. They're going to look at that radar and see how fast they're going and cheer, is my fear. And I just think, yeah, to take another look at that where it does level off. Maybe that is farther than you think to the intersection. But I agree, something physical really is needed. There's no sidewalks there at all.
Right. Okay, well, that sounds good. I will put that on my list of things to sort of do and then follow up. We'll discuss with NDOT. It'll be like a little bit outside of our typical program constraints, but I don't think it's an unreasonable ask at all. So we'll follow up with you all on that.
David, on that, when you'd said that you don't like to put the cushions too close to the intersection, could you say more about why? Are there any like particular like movements of cars around or through an intersection that you're worried about?
Essentially what NDOT does is build our speed cushion guidelines based off of published ITE materials. So they have a list of clearances and constraints and things. For intersections like this that aren't controlled on the direction, that clearance is like 20 feet. So that's like item number one, but then sort of the thing that prevented us from putting that in our concept initially is NDOT's preference is to not have streets that just have like one speed cushion on them, mainly because they come as a surprise. But all that being said, I don't disagree with you all that this probably is a case that it could just use. Maybe it is only one speed cushion at the bottom of the hill, but that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
And could I'd be interested in hearing Patrick and Kent's comments, just kind of for the record, on how much through traffic Boscobel gets. Like, how often are people traveling down Boscobel that would go straight through that intersection? It seems like that would be a very small number of travelers that would need to use that as like a through route, which might make that kind of different as an intersection than what you're used to seeing.
Yeah, this is Patrick again. You're exactly right. Like 16th gets like 95% of the traffic. Boscobel is really narrow as you head from like 16th to 15th. So there's really just not a lot of traffic going that direction. So really all the traffic is just on 16th turning off Shelby heading towards Lillian.
Cool. Well, that makes sense. While we're here, any other comments, discussion on 16th Street? All right. And then anything else on South 11th? This one is quite a bit longer, a little more complex, and we had a few more options at our disposal.
Hi, David. This is Steve Moats. We live between Russell and Fatherland in the MC3 condo community. Our unit is just right about where the second C is going from left to right. And this looks great to me, to us. We've had traffic problems, of course, on this stretch of road because it's high. There's a high volume of people trying to get to 5 Points and high volume of Uber and Lyfts. And the road is narrow to begin with. And when people are parking on both sides of the street, which most of the street is parking on both sides, it narrows the drive. And so that slows the traffic some, but not a lot. And one question that I do have is about the bulb outs. I really think that this might not be a popular with a lot of people, but I do believe that we have so much parking available on South 11th Street that adds to the congestion and the danger, people walking out behind cars and into traffic, those types of things. And so these bulb outs that are located at each, looks like at each intersection, I'm assuming those will reduce some parking spaces. Is that correct, on the street?
Yes and no. So in Nashville, I believe the distance you are legally required to leave between a parked car and an intersection is 20 feet. So oftentimes that's not, followed. Certainly it could be enforced more. So essentially, bulb outs take that space and force it to be reserved with the striping and delineators. So I say yes and no because, yes, I may feel like my parking space went away if I'm the one who always parks right next to the stop sign, but no, because we don't remove any like legal parking spaces. We simply add to the tools that have residents park appropriately. And then the intent, of course, is it's called daylighting intersections, so basically making it easier to see if people are wanting to cross the road or are walking near the intersection.
Okay. Well, it is, I mean, from experience, it is difficult to pull out of Russell, Fatherland, Holly, wherever you are, even though we're not physically on those streets. We do use those streets. It's very difficult to pull out onto South 11th because you can't see around the cars and how close. We get illegal parking all the time. So I was just curious about how that would impact visibility. But overall, I think we both have positive feedback on this plan.
Great. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The intent is to improve visibility. And that was sort of another reason why this street in particular gets a lot of bulb outs, is because we observe that often people are parking too close to the intersection in an unsafe way.
Yeah, I'm sure that one last comment, I'm sure that everybody's using their GPS, whatever Waze or whatever they're using, and the drivers, Ubers, Lyft, cabs, whoever that are driving around, South 10th is a much better, wider street for those. And so I think these speed cushions will deter some of that traffic that we get, especially in the evenings. When people, there's a lot of people on the sidewalks because of all the venues that are around us. So this is good in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, I've got some questions on these. So the bulb outs on all the ones that you have designed, is it intended to wrap around the corner on both sides on each of these?
Yes. Yeah, the only situations where that doesn't happen is if the side street is like so narrow that there's really no room to narrow it more. We have a couple of those in Germantown, but the way we'll design these is basically find the center lines and then go 10 feet out from there. So narrowing down to NDOT's like lowest lane width, and then the rest of the space is repurposed.
And then especially the closer you get to 5 Points, the more frequent it is that we have scooters left on the sidewalk. And like 11th and Fatherland, they collect at least that far to the south. And I've noticed, like around in Midtown especially, there are some of the daylight intersections have scooter corrals marked, and even some bike racks installed, blue bike racks, like in the street that could be, like bike parking for, where Far East was, or, for these bike shares. Is that something that could be part of these bulb outs along 11th?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I believe yes. I've talked with NDOT about this and brought it up and got generally positive feedback. So what I'll do is design these with those marked. I think I'll have to check with them to find out like how many bike racks they have at the moment, or if they'll need to like order some. But yeah, absolutely, we can do the striping for the scooter and bike corral. Probably not in like every single bulb out, because that would be like 10 corrals each. But certainly we can get strategic with it and probably send those a little bit closer to the 5 Points area where the scooters are a problem.
Okay, great. Two more questions. One is that where Russell and Holly are kind of offset between that furthest north speed cushion, there is an intersection there right next to Bad Idea, where Russell comes in from the west to hit 11th. That's currently not marked for bulb outs, but that is one of the intersections that has the worst problems with parking encroachment.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I think there's just one, because the Holly and Russell both dead end right there at 11th. It creates an extra intersection, but it looks like there's just one that's not marked for bulb outs that we'd love to have included.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll make a note to add a set of bulb outs on that other portion of Russell.
And then the last one is that right where that furthest north speed cushion is marked, right in front of what is now Bad Idea. The impetus for our application was originally to request a raised crosswalk there that could function the dual purpose of traffic calming and creating finally some ADA compliant crossing there. And it was also because the request came from a neighbor in that area who had a child who was visually impaired. It was really concerned about how difficult it was to navigate those intersections because there's nothing across 11th with ramps. Could we get that cushion replaced with a raised crosswalk there?
For this design, probably not. Definitely NDOT is interested in finding opportunities to improve ADA compliance. So I don't think it would be out of the question to ask for a crosswalk. A raised one would be great, but at the very bare minimum, like cutting in a curb ramp on the other side of Russell to receive a crosswalk like that, I think is reasonable. What we can do is open up a request that will be evaluated by their like construction group. There's like a whole list of ADA kind of small like improvement projects that NDOT works on, and I would like that for that to be one of them for sure. But they don't want to lump in too many like different types of work onto one project. So traffic calming tries to really focus on the more like quick build type of implementation. So modular cushions, paint, delineators, things like that. And that way they're able to build the whole thing at the same time and move on. But certainly I don't disagree that some more crossing facilities here would be time and money well spent.
Well, just thank you for everything you put into the design here. That this, I think, will address a lot of different issues we've had on 11th Street for a long time, and very excited for this, and really appreciate your eye and your effort here. So thank you.
Excellent. No problem. The next part of the presentation is more like timeline, next steps, sort of what happens with voting, things like that. We can move on, but before I do we have any more questions or comments about kind of the designs themselves?
Hey, David. I apologize if I got on the meeting late, so I apologize if you introduced some of these concepts earlier. But I love what I'm seeing here. I just walked back and forth from 5 Points about an hour ago down 11th from my house, and this will be a greatly improved scenario. Curious about the Shelby and 11th intersection.
Yeah.
Looks like you've got a stop sign recommended there. Would that be like taking it down from the signalization?
No, so it's I guess the intent there is to mark where vehicles are stopping. There's actually a signal there, I believe, right? Yeah. Okay. So the stops there are more to contextualize like where speed cushions are. We're not proposing a stop sign at 11th and Shelby. The signal there is going to be what remains as this project anyway.
Thanks for the clarification. That makes sense. Would there be any ability to modify that signal or do bump outs, at least on the south side of 11th at that intersection? It's 3 lanes with a left turn lane heading south, which is rarely used right now. It's pretty difficult to cross there any way you cross, and it doesn't accommodate bicycles at all. So I'm wondering if that could be addressed with part of this project. Is that in the scope?
I will gladly ask about it. I suspect that we will probably save that for a different project type. But I definitely hear you that it's not necessarily ideal for that additional turn lane to be in there and by its existence kind of prevent a bulb out situation from happening. That is we don't out over there is because there's 3 lanes instead of 2, so then there's no room.
Yeah, and it kind of sets the tone for the roadway as well.
No doubt.
So it seems like it could be it really could be part of this in concept.
Yeah, if you don't mind, could you shoot me an email that just sort of like describes exactly what you're thinking and all discussion with our partners in NDOT to see what they think.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the work on this. This is going to be a great improvement. I'm highly in favor of it. That's awesome.
Excellent. Any more questions or comments?
Yeah, I just had one quick question. I'm actually walking my dog on South 11th right now. Yeah. I'm wondering if any of the bulb outs or any of this would include like crosswalk striping or any of that. I know James mentioned a raised crosswalk, but is there any just like striping that could go in?
Potentially. We can. The more likely ones are where we have 2 opposing ADA ramps already, and striping the crosswalk is sort of reinforcing visually like an existing crossing. The less likely ones are where we'd be like crossing into a curb basically. So on Lillian, for instance, if you crossed 11th, where you land doesn't have a ramp for like ADA concerns. So we're likely not planning on like adding more crossing points mid-block. but we can look into if any of the crosswalks that exist aren't striped, striping them, or refreshing ones that have maybe been worn down over the years.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to echo what everybody else has said, I think this is great. Like that second C from the right is directly in front of my house, so that'd be great.
Awesome. Anyone else?
David, I just had one follow-up, which I know when you went over the different options that stop signs were not really part of this project. I was wondering in situations like what we were talking about because of the hill where the speed cushions are not a great option or likely, is that something you can like pull in, like adding stop signs at the bottom of, 16th and Basketball? Is that possible, or is that just a completely different process?
We generally do not include adding stop signs as traffic calming. That primarily stems from a stop sign's intent, and basically they're not intended to slow cars down. They're really more a device to communicate who is supposed to go when. So in this case, my worry on adding a stop sign at Basketball is basically that it would just get blown through a lot, particularly if people are coming down that steep hill. There isn't a lot of traffic on Basketball, so someone could maybe with more confidence run that stop sign, and that can create situations that are more dangerous than you started with. So certainly my preference would be to put a speed cushion somewhere like very close to that intersection instead of a stop sign, but that's basically what I've got there.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right. Well, if nobody minds moving on, we can talk about kind of the flow chart of the program and next steps. So this here is a diagram that basically outlines what all can happen between now and the end of the project. We're at this big red circle, the neighborhood meeting. Prior to that, both streets applied, were selected through the prioritization process we reviewed. Now we're going to take some time and do a final design. So plans that are more zoomed in, kind of construction quality design, a lot more specifics about what we're drawing. And then one of two things can happen. We can either post those plans online and just like vote as soon as they're ready, or we can schedule a second meeting to sort of review what we've come up with, take more feedback, and then move on to an online ballot after that. It is sort of up to the group, and I'll say that we don't have to have both streets do one or the other. We can split them off if necessary. And I guess I'll say I've gotten some good feedback that will result in our final design looking different than our concepts. So certainly we're not opposed to doing a second meeting if you all want. But if everyone would prefer to just keep moving forward, we can move on to voting after the design is complete. So I will take some feedback on that, and I guess the easiest thing to do. Does anyone from 11th or 16th prefer to have a second meeting to review our construction plans?
I guess when would we get a chance to, if you do revise the plans for 16th, would that be like emailed out, or how would we get to see that before we voted on it?
They'll be posted to NDOT's website. So when you get a ballot card in the mail, you'll be directed to the website where you vote, and that's where those plans will be for review.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to hold anything up. I just wanted to make sure we got a chance to kind of see any revisions. So that sounds good.
So, well, I have a question real quick, piggyback on that. So for the 16th Street one, you're saying that if we just proceeded, there might be revisions, but we're not going to know what those are until we see the ballot.
That's correct. Yeah, you would get the postcard notifying everyone it's time to vote. You'll see the plans, and they'll either look very similar to this, or they'll have that additional speed cushion down at Boscobel.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Hi, my name's Faith. I also live on South 16th Street. My house has the distinct pleasure of actually having been hit by a car
Oh God.
that came down the hill. So I know I'm so sorry I was late today. Work ran late, but I just want to echo James let me know that Patrick and Kent also kind of help push back on the light up speed signs. Um, I agree that I used to live in a neighborhood in San Diego that was on a very steep hill, and we petitioned the city for a similar intervention. That is what they installed, and it did absolutely nothing for the safety of the neighborhood, which was really unfortunate. A few streets over, they did install speed bumps, even though it was a very hilly neighborhood, and that did help. One of the residents who lives up on Lillian, he was pretty vocal about this before he passed away. There are children that live on Lillian. And there are a lot of pet owners around here too, and it is very scary to walk on the street. I have a small dog myself, without sidewalks on South 16th Street. So just want to further emphasize if there's anything that can be done, if you can find a spot for a speed bump or maybe children present sign or anything that would further encourage people to do the right thing instead of flying down this hill and potentially hitting another house. I would greatly appreciate that. And that's all for now.
Yeah, thank you, Faith. I hear that feedback loud and clear. And just to confirm, I am planning on adding this cushion unless I encounter some reason why we absolutely cannot. So I agree that the radar feedback signs are not, the best possible solution. So we'll work to improve this concept before finalizing the plans.
Amazing. Really appreciate you guys taking this so seriously and doing whatever you can to help make our streets safer. It really means a lot.
Of course.
David, I have a question. South 11th Street here. The sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. So unless there is a great need, a lot of change in the design, I would prefer us to move forward. The one thing I do request is that there is some type of notification, whether it comes through our council member of like the final plan. So for example, we have 20 homeowners in our condo community. It would be important for all of them to know what the plan is because it could support the vote and the ballot. And I think it's important that we get as many people, even though we all got the cards, there's nobody else from our community, our condo community here tonight. And my husband is on the board. I previously was on the board. And so it's important that we have that design, be able to share it with our neighbors so they know, go vote. This is something that's going to improve our neighborhood and we all have the same problem. So that to me is more important than having a second meeting if it's not absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Definitely like what I hear there. So the order of operations, just to clarify, should we choose to go straight to the ballot, is we'll post the plans onto the website. They'll be available. Then ballots will be sent out to everyone. And the voting is open for 6 weeks. So part of the reason that timeline is so long is to give neighbors as much opportunity as they need to reach out to their, next door neighbors, anyone else, walk the street, do whatever, campaigning you'd like to do. We encourage that if anyone, feels strongly one way or another.
And So we have like a pretty good, I think, directory with the neighborhood and like relationships with some of these, like with the HOAs for the multifamily developments. But I had a question on the voting eligibility, is in particular for the condo building at 11th and Fatherland, the 37206 building. All those people have addresses on Fatherland, and all of the residential units are on the second and third floors. And then like, so the land itself that abuts the 11th is not owned by those residents. Just before we start pushing on them or asking them to vote, are they going to be included, or how do we know who gets to vote in like a situation like that where like the property ownership is like a little weird?
Yeah, let me skip this slide really quick just to address your question. So this is Metro Nashville's like mailing list generator tool. It's sort of just like a wrapper for Parcel Viewer. But basically the eligibility consists of any parcel of property with a line that abuts the street. In the cases of things like condos or one lot that has two houses on it owned by different people, as long as the common property is along the street, we'll take every unit that's within that common property. So condos ought to be included, and I think that's that. We see a lot of small polygons within the larger one. In addition to these two pictures, if requested, we're happy to distribute the list of eligible voters. We're not going to send out everyone's codes for obvious reasons, but if that would be helpful, we'd be happy to do that.
That would be very. Steve, just while you're on the call, I want to point out that all of those that face Russell are included, so we'll make sure to push on them too. So thank you, David.
No problem. So it sounds like we can plan on just moving straight to the ballot for both of these streets. So I'll spend a little bit of time just kind of reviewing the details of that. But like I mentioned before, you'll get a similar postcard to the one that invited you to this meeting. It'll be stamped with a unique ID that will be entered into NDOT's online ballot form. That's how you vote yes or no. We do have an option to call into NDOT and just have them like help you vote if anyone would prefer to vote by phone. And then certainly if you hear of like your neighbor getting a ballot card but you didn't, or it got lost in the mail or something, just let us know. We're happy to look up like what the person is if their postcard gets lost for some reason. So just if you're passionate about voting, maybe like check in with your neighbors when ballots are expected and just make sure this doesn't get missed. It takes a 2/3 majority to approve a project. So if 66% of respondents or more vote yes, we'll move forward to construction. That's not 66% of like everyone who's eligible to vote. It's only of the people that do vote. So if 3 people voted and 2 of them vote yes, then that's a thumbs up. Project moves forward. A couple of minutia about eligibility. Like we covered, only properties abutting the right-of-way are eligible. Churches and schools each get a vote as well. That's a relatively new addition. But commercial businesses do not. This will probably have more commercial businesses than almost any other street we've done. But we have that rule in place just to make sure that the residents of a neighborhood are the ones we're focusing on and meeting their needs. A property needs to like be occupied or have a building on it. So if it's just an empty lot, we're not going to send a postcard to their owner. We don't like knock on doors to make sure a house like has someone living in it. But if it's, you know, clearly under construction or has just been torn down, those are a couple of reasons why a property would get excluded. And then if anyone like owns a bunch of properties or really any multiple of one property, it's one vote per like person. So you don't get like 10 votes if you own 10 of the houses along the street. And that's about the end of the presentation. I'm happy to take questions, of course.
I just want to note on that yeah, not only like our street is going to be a little weird probably from what you normally deal with. That there are businesses on there, but there are also on that 100 block and 200 block, there are properties that are zoned for mixed use but are used as residences. People live there. I just want to make sure we get those people to vote.
Yeah, we actually don't look at the zoning to decide if it's commercial or not. It's more of a visual, and we're not going to great lengths to like exclude as many properties as possible. I'll like check at those. Anything else?
I think that's Cynthia's camera making that noise. Is someone able to mute her?
I just did. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Sounds like maybe not. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate all of the engagement we've had this evening, and thanks for bearing with my questionable voice quality. I've been a little scratchy today. But yeah, this QR code will take you to the Traffic Calming website where there's a lot more information, and follow NDOT on their various social media arms. But otherwise, thanks everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, David Poop.